The good people at Portkeys sent me this monitor to review. I'm not sponsored by Portkeys and they're not paying me. They had absolutely no stipulations about what I do with this monitor. And in fact, it's been almost 3 months since they sent it to me. Here I am just trying to finish it up. So here's my review of the Portkeys LH5 high brightness HDR monitor with this thing called the long arm controller. This is a nice little monitor, 5 inches, lightweight, compact. It looks really good and it is very bright. So here's some nice little beauty shots of it, how it looks mounted on top of my camera. The body is plastic, but it doesn't feel too cheap. That plastic makes it lightweight, which is a benefit in my opinion. Side by side with the Atomos Ninja 5, you can see that the Ninja looks to be a little larger. The screen would appear to be larger, but it's actually the same exact size. The bezel is just wider. I kind of like that the Portkeys LH5 is a smaller bezel for the same amount of screen size. This monitor has a plethora of options inside. You can put all kinds of guidelines, different sizes, different aspect ratios. There are crosshairs and grids, lots of options there. You can flip the entire image upside down, and you can also flip just the on-screen display upside down. Those are independent, it's really nice. It has some really nice support for LUTs. So you plug a little thumb drive in the bottom of that USB connector and you can install custom LUTs, and then you just select them here in the menu and there you go. It was not too hard to do. And then under function setup we have custom function buttons. There are 4 on the top, so you can assign them to, say, peaking, maybe your zebras, maybe you want to turn the zoom on and off. So you just set those here, and you'll want to set the camera control to one of those because that's how you select your camera for controlling your camera, and I haven't talked about that yet. We'll get into that in just a moment. Taking a look at the manual, we can see that it supports a wide range of input resolutions, all the way up to DCI 4K at 24 Hz. I don't know that it does 23976, which is more common maybe, but it does support 4K up to 30 Hz. The E2 outputs up to 4K 60, so this won't accept it. If you have to set the Zcam E2 to 20997 or something below that, and then you'll be able to get 4K, and then you can use the zoom function on the monitor. Here's a quick shot of how long it takes to turn on. So right there, 1, 2, 3, maybe 3 or 4 seconds to turn on. That's pretty quick. And there you can see that it does accept 4K 30. It has a really cool ability to scale the size of the image, just vertically and horizontally. It's really great if you're working in odd anamorphic ratios, like a 1.7 or 1.8 or something like that. You might find this very useful. And so let's talk about using this with the camera, because this is where this thing gets really interesting. So the LH5 might seem like just another nice high brightness on camera monitor until you start talking about this, the long arm controller is what they call it. This is a little module that plugs into the side and it gives you control over some of your cameras. Cameras like the E2, the GH5S, the GH5, and even some Sony cameras. So this makes it a lot more interesting. Let's take a look at this. The long arm controller has 2 HDMI connectors and they fit just perfectly into the connectors on the side of the monitor. So it gives you input and output, and also gives you control with this little cable at the bottom. And this one's a USB to 2.5 millimeter for lanc control. So the input comes in on the top, that feeds into the side of the monitor. It's mini HDMI to full-size HDMI. And you also have HDMI output on the side. I just don't have a cable for it. Let's see if we can't plug this into my camera and get some control. So you hit this button here. I've got this mapped to the camera controls. And since I do have a autofocus lens, I have access to a lot of these controls here. So I've been playing around with the settings a little bit, and right now I have it on focus. And if I go over here, this little touch autofocus, I can actually touch autofocus with my E2. You can see it's showing me the peak focusing as it does that. If I click over here in this tree, it's going to focus back towards this tree, which is pretty cool. So the speed of the focus is dependent on the camera. The E2 is not very fast at focusing. It just uses contrast detect focus. But that's pretty cool. And then to get out of that, I hit that button there. To change which camera you can control, you press and hold the custom function that you previously assigned to camera control. And in this menu, you can scroll through the various camera options. Of course, we have Canon, Sony. There's a Blackmagic option. I don't think it works with the new Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. There's E2, of course, and there's a generic one here. Maybe a Fuji might work with it, who knows. And then you can also flip the side that the controls are on with this little option here, which is kind of nice. You have the most control over the E2, so say for example you press ISO, you press this plus and minus button and you can see that I'm changing the ISO. Now it is pretty slow, you have to hit it maybe once every half a second. Any faster it just won't respond. And then same for shutter and aperture. Focusing works a little differently. You can press and hold the buttons and it will continuously move that focus point, which is really nice. And they have 3 different speeds. That's what the 3 different size of arrows means, or the 3 different number of arrows. So it's fastest at the top and bottom arrows. It would be nice if that press and hold worked for other options like ISO, but as you can see here, it doesn't work. It only will step once every press. So here's a closer look at the long arm controller. The input comes in on the top and it goes right into the side. Output comes out of the bottom, and that's the output for the HDMI. And you can notice that there's little set screws on all those, so you can actually clamp down on those cables so they don't come undone. And of course the bottom has the USB to lanc connector, and it has a 2.5mm which works with both GH5S, GH5, and the E2. They have other cables available for other cameras. I have to point out that initially my E2 didn't work with all the controls on the monitor. For example, the record button didn't work, the menu didn't work. I had to send my camera back to Zcam to have the lanc chip updated, but that's only because I bought the Zcam E2 early on. I had it by October of 2018. Here I've connected it to the GH5, and as you can see, there are a lot less controls. You get basic record, start, stop, and I think there's an autofocus trigger. I had mine set to continuous autofocus, so that autofocus button just wasn't going to do anything on this. If you don't have that turned on, then you press that button, and whatever your focus point is, it's going to focus on that point. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the up and down buttons to control anything. The manual shows that the plus minus buttons are for zooming, but I don't know of any micro four thirds lens that has electronic zoom. It would be nice if you could hit that ISO button and then make the change, but it just wouldn't do anything. One of the reasons you use an external monitor like this is because of the waveform monitor. It's one of the best tools to judge your exposure by. It shows the overall scene, left to right, and exposure top to bottom. It's invaluable. You also have false color, but I personally prefer waveform monitor. Now, with the Portkeys, it's down here in the corner and you can't move it. And also it does this weird thing where if you have on-screen controls, they show up on the waveform monitor. Those white peaks there are these controls. You can see how it goes away when I turn that off. I think that's pretty clunky. It should only ever show you the input signal, not what the monitor itself is producing. Whereas the Tomos doesn't have that issue. If I bring up the on-screen display, it doesn't change the monitor. And if I go to waveform, I can actually reposition this in a couple different ways. I can have it across the bottom. I can also have it take up nearly the entire screen like that, which makes it really, really nice for setting exposure. You can see here. If you touch over here, it goes back into the corner. Now you can see here with both monitors flat, there's no LUT here, no LUT here. This one is brighter. The white back there is definitely brighter. The overall scene is brighter. You can see the 1500 nits versus the 1000 nits. This is quite a bit brighter. Whereas this guy is maxed out. If I can display, that's the backlight right there. It's up all the way. I've come inside and I've put my little lav mic on top of the monitor so that we can hear how loud the fan is at its different settings. So right now it's in low. I'll come over here and switch it to medium. And then high. You can hear high is quite a bit louder. This would be too loud on a quiet set, like maybe an interview. This would be too loud. But then again, if you're doing an interview, hopefully you wouldn't need the fan that high. There's no auto setting. You just have low, medium, and high. And then I'll turn this off and go to the Ninja 5. If I can hold it. And right off the bat, I'm going to put my mic over here. You can hear it's it's already making noise. And in fact, that's louder. Well, it's calming down now, so that's better, but it's still pretty loud. So it's not all good news. There are some things I don't like about this monitor. For one, it doesn't have a locking power connector. The one on the bottom here just pushes in, so it won't stay attached if it gets pulled. It has a single 1/4-20 mount. It's on the bottom, and it doesn't have the RE locating pins. I prefer to have one on the top and the bottom. There are some arms you could buy for this or some brackets to hold it, but it'd be nice if it just came with the right hardware. It has some different battery mounting options. Here's a V-mount plate. This is the one that came with it. It's a Sony NP-F style. They call it the L sometimes. And here's a Canon LP-E6. And there's also dummy batteries. This came with the Sony NP-F style, which is great because that's the kind of battery I have. However, you can see that little tab that holds it in. It's not very secure. If I hit the monitor, if I kind of jerk it, that battery can fall off. And that's not a good thing. You never want to lose power in the middle of a shoot, right? You may have noticed here in this freeze frame and other places, the voltage says 0. That's because after you've had it on for a couple minutes, it stops reading your battery voltage. I did have a number of issues with the monitor losing signal. It happened with the long arm controller, it happened with cables, but it was sometimes difficult to repeat. So I'm not sure if it had something to do with maybe a bad solder joint, maybe it gets warm or cold, it changes. I don't really know. It just, when you have a monitor like this, that's kind of the bottom line. Like, it needs to have the signal all the time. It needs to be reliable. And this one, it just wasn't. So that's kind of the biggest mark against it. And it could have just been the model I had. The one I had maybe was a slight flaw in the input. One more thing. Sometimes the menu is grayed out, and I don't know why. I can't get to these controls. The color temperature of the screen, the tint, sharpness, all this. I can't get to it right now. It just won't let me in. So overall, for $279, you get a very nice monitor. It's very bright. It has a lot of features. If you want the monitor with the long arm controller, it costs a little bit more. So right here, this one says for the Z-Cam, Panasonic, I believe they're all the same price. And you can see the options, all these Sony cameras. And this looks like it's just the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, the first version, not the 4K. It's a good price for a nice monitor with a lot of features. And Portkeys, I think you'll see more from them. They already have one called the BM5, which kind of surpasses this one in that you don't need the long arm controller. It has that built in and has some other nice features like a metal body, but it costs more than this one for sure. So if you're on a bit of a budget, this is the one I'd get. And like I said, they're working on some other stuff. They have an EVF coming up called the OI. That's looking really neat. So stay tuned. I'll probably have a review of that once it's released. Thank you for watching my review. If you'd like to see me review something else, please leave a comment down below. I've got a Tilted Nucleus Nano I've been wanting to review, so that might be next. If you like what you saw here, please hit that like and subscribe button and hit that little notification bell if you want to be notified when I post another video. I'll see you then.